When a woman at 32 weeks pregnant collapses with eclampsia, the medical explanation is pretty straightforward. The blood pressure spikes so high, the brain literally starts to swell. Doctors call it cortical blindness. Your visual cortex just stops processing the world and starts firing randomly. It's a biological machine breaking down. The brain is starved for oxygen, and it starts digging through old memories to build a story for why the lights are going out. It's basically a desperate hallucination. That's what the chart at the hospital in Seattle says about Madison. It's a closed loop of biology and physics. But the medical record doesn't account for the resolution of the wood grain, or why she came back knowing the exact opacity of a secret she'd buried 10 years ago. The wood was too real. That's the first thing I noticed. I'm a designer. I spend 10 hours a day staring at pixels, trying to make things look tactile on a flat screen. I know how to fake texture, but this table, it was like the resolution had been cranked up to a point that shouldn't exist. I could see the microscopic lift in the oak grain. I could see the way the light hit the dust motes. Not like a hazy filter, but like each one was a tiny, perfect sphere. My hands were on the surface. They weren't swollen. For the last 2 months of this pregnancy, I haven't seen my knuckles. They've just been these puffy, tight gloves of skin. But there, they were, mine. I could see the faint blue line of the vein on my wrist. It was sharp, high contrast. I wasn't alone. I knew that before I even looked up. There was a man sitting across from me. He didn't have a glow. He didn't have a robe. He was wearing a soft, heather gray shirt, the kind of fabric you can almost feel just by looking at it. I knew it was Jesus. I didn't arrive at that conclusion. I didn't sense it. It was like recognizing a font I'd used 1,000 times. You just know the weight of it. He didn't say anything at first. He was just watching me look at the table. My breath, I realized I wasn't actually breathing, but my chest wasn't tight. It was like I'd been holding a heavy breath for a decade and finally just stopped. You're looking for the flaws, Madison. His voice didn't come through my ears. It landed in the center of my head. It felt like a clean, sans serif thought. I looked at him and my throat felt like it was full of sand. I tried to say something about the table, about the wood, but I couldn't find the right word. I looked down at my wedding ring. It was gone. I was just in the field, I said. My voice sounded thin. I was Mount Rainier, the wildflowers. He nodded. He didn't move his hands. They were resting on the table, and I noticed his nails were clean but short, like he worked with his hands. The light turned neon, I said. I was talking too fast. I could feel the words tripping over each other. I was walking, the trail near paradise. I wanted to see the lupine before the baby came, and then the sky, it didn't turn black. It turned this horrific, oversaturated pink, like a CMYK error. Like the printer had just dumped all the magenta at once. I remember the metallic taste. That's what eclampsia tastes like. Lead and copper. I remember the ground hitting my knees, but it didn't feel like dirt. It felt like I was falling through a low-resolution map. I was 32 weeks. I was terrified for the baby. I remember clutching my stomach, and then the shutter just closed. And then I was at the table. "I'm dead, aren't I?" I asked him. I kept waiting for him to look disappointed. I grew up in a house where God was a creative director who never liked your first draft. I spent my 20s telling people I was an atheist because it was easier than waiting for the rejection email from heaven. I'd had an abortion when I was 22. I was a junior in college. I was scared. I didn't tell my parents. I deleted that file. Or I thought I did. I spent 10 years carrying that choice like a layer with 10% opacity. You can't really see it, but it changes every other color on the page. Jesus smiled. It wasn't a peaceful smile. It was the smile of someone who knows exactly what you're thinking and isn't bothered by it. "We have to go back through the files, Madison." He leaned forward. "We have to look at the layers you tried to hide." I felt my shoulders hike up to my ears. I didn't even know I'd been holding them that high. "I don't want to see it," I whispered. "I know what's in there. I know I broke the rules. I know I'm a sinner or a murderer or whatever the people with the signs say." He stood up. He didn't look like he was judging me. He looked like he was inviting me to a critique, not to tear me down, but to show me where the design went wrong. "Come on," he said, and the table didn't disappear. It just expanded. The room, if it was a room, started to bleed white, but not a flat white. It was a white that had every color in it. It was blinding and soft at the same time. I tried to reach for my stomach, to feel the baby, but my hands just went through the space where my body used to be. I was a point of view. I was a camera. And then the light box opened. It wasn't a movie of my life. It was more like I was being dropped back into the raw files. I could see myself at 5 crying because I broke a crayon. But I didn't just see it. I felt the specific, sharp frustration of a 5-year-old. I felt the way my mom's hand felt on my hair, the exact texture of her sweater. But then we got to the gray years. That's what I called them. The years after the abortion. The years where I told everyone there was no God because a God wouldn't have let me get that desperate. Jesus was right there. He wasn't watching the screen. He was watching me. "Look at the color here," he said. He was pointing at a moment when I was 23. I was sitting in my apartment in Ballard, staring at a blank screen, drinking cheap wine, and trying not to think about the date. It would have been the due date. "It's gray," I said. "It's all gray. I ruined it." "No," he said. "Look closer. Look at the blue under the gray." I didn't understand. I looked at the layer of my life from that year, and I saw this tiny pulsing thread of light. It was hovering. It wasn't attached to me, but it was near me. It was like a sketch that hadn't been inked yet. "What is that?" I asked. My heart, or whatever was in my chest, started to hammer. "That's the soul you think you lost," he said. I stopped. I couldn't move. The white space around us seemed to vibrate. "You can't delete a soul, Madison," he said. "That's not how I built the system." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't just kindness. It was authority. It was the person who designed the universe telling me I'd misunderstood the most basic rule. "But I ended it," I said. The word abortion felt like it was made of lead. "I killed it." He shook his head. He reached out and touched the gray year in front of us. "You didn't kill anything," he said. You delayed the release. You weren't ready. The environment wasn't right. So we held the file." I felt a sob break out of me, but no sound came out. It was just a massive release of pressure. 10 years of thinking I was a monster. 10 years of thinking I destroyed a person. "Where is it?" I asked. "Where is that soul now?" Jesus looked at me. He didn't answer right away. He let the question hang in that bright, vibrating white space. He looked down at where my stomach would be if I had a body. "You already know?" he said. I couldn't breathe. I mean, I wasn't breathing anyway, but the idea of it, the idea that the baby currently inside me, the one kicking my ribs at 2 a.m. in my apartment in Capitol Hill, was the same soul from 10 years ago. It felt like a system crash. My mind was trying to find a reason why that was impossible. I was looking for the undo button. "Wait," I said. My hands were shaking. I could see the tremor in the high-def light. That's not how time works. Like, I had the procedure. I saw the paperwork. I paid the bill. It was gone. I deleted it. I lived 10 years thinking I couldn't say the word. Even here with him, the word felt like a jagged piece of glass in my throat. Jesus stepped closer. He didn't look like he was in a hurry. He looked like he had all the time in the world to wait for my brain to catch up to the reality he lived in. "You're thinking in linear time, Madison. You're thinking in flattened layers." He gestured to the light box around us. The files of my life were still visible, but they were starting to stack on top of each other. I could see the moment I was raped at 22, the dark corner of that party, the smell of stale beer and damp wool. I tried to look away. I tried to hide that layer, but it wouldn't move. "I don't want to see the rape," I snapped. I felt a surge of heat in my face. I don't want to see the clinic. I don't want to see the way I hated myself for a decade. Why are we looking at this? "Because you're still carrying the shame as if it's part of the final design," he said. "You think the trauma is the background color, but it's just a mask." He reached his hand into the air, and it was like he was grabbing the opacity slider on a design program. He didn't touch me, but I felt a physical tug in my chest. "The soul," he said, and his voice got lower, more intense. "It doesn't fully attach until the house is ready. In those early weeks, it's like a knock on the door. It's an invitation. When the pregnancy ends, for any reason, Madison, that soul doesn't die. You can't kill what hasn't finished joining. It just returns to the queue. It waits for the right moment, the right environment. I looked at the layer of my 22nd year. I saw that little thread of blue light again. It was hovering near the Madison on the screen. It didn't look hurt. It didn't look like it was screaming. It looked patient, like a file waiting for a faster connection. "So you're saying I didn't murder anyone?" I asked. I was desperate. I needed him to say it again. I've spent 10 years walking past churches and looking at the ground because I thought the people inside had a wanted poster with my face on it. Jesus looked at the gray years, my decade of atheism. I saw myself at 26, mocking a coworker for wearing a cross. I saw the bitterness I used as a shield. The religious laws you were taught, they're people trying to describe a sun they've only seen through a keyhole, he said. I blinked. But they use your name. They use your book. They use the parts that let them feel in control, he said. They focus on the sacrifice. I always told them I wanted mercy. There is no condemnation here, Madison. Not for the rape. Not for the choice you made when you were broken and alone. I didn't send you a bill for that. I didn't put a black mark on your soul. I felt my jaw go slack. My teeth actually clicked together. Then why did it feel so bad? Why did I feel like I was rotting from the inside for 10 years? Because you were the one throwing the stones, he said. He pointed to a layer from 2 years ago. I was at a wedding. I saw a woman there who was pregnant, and I remember the sharp, stinging envy I felt. But it wasn't just envy. It was a self-hatred so thick I could almost see it as a dark filter over the whole scene. You judged yourself by a standard I never gave you, Jesus said. You thought you had to be perfect to be mine. But I only work with the broken pieces. That's where the light gets in. I looked back at the hovering blue thread. And now, I whispered, the baby? The one at 32 weeks. The one in the field. The light box shifted. Suddenly, we weren't looking at the past. We were looking at a live feed. I saw myself, the physical Madison, lying in that field of wildflowers near Mount Rainier. I looked gray. My tongue was bitten. My eyes were rolled back. I looked like a piece of meat that had been dropped. But hovering over that broken body was a massive, pulsing light. And inside that light, I could see the blue thread. It was woven into the center of the baby's heart. It was baked in now. He's been waiting for you to be ready, Jesus said. He wanted you when you were whole, when you could love him without the shadow of that room 10 years ago. He? I asked. I felt a weird, jagged laugh jump out of my throat. It's a boy? Jesus smiled. He's stubborn, like his mother. He wasn't going to let a little thing like eclampsia stop the release. I reached out, trying to touch the image of the baby on the screen, but the image started to flicker. The high-resolution wood of the table started to blur. The white light of the room began to take on a reddish tint, like blood. Wait, I shouted. I have more questions. I don't know how to go back. I don't know how to be a mother if I'm still this broken. You aren't broken anymore, Madison, he said. His voice was receding, like he was moving into a different room. We just finished the cleanup. Now we move to the refuge. The floor beneath me, the solid, grain-perfect oak, suddenly turned into liquid. I didn't fall, but I felt myself being pulled sideways like a drag-and-drop motion. The light box vanished. The smell of ozone came back, but it was mixed with something else. Something heavy, like incense and old stone. I was standing in a place that felt like a cathedral made of wind. And that's when I saw the shadow. Not a bad shadow. A shadow that felt like a mountain standing over me. I looked up, and I wasn't at the table anymore. I was standing in front of something that wasn't a man. It was a frequency. It was a wall of sound that had a face. Archangel Michael. I knew the name the same way I knew the color red. It was just an objective fact. He was holding a hand up, and there was a beam of white light coming out of his palm, hitting me directly in the center of my chest. I felt my knees buckle. I hadn't even realized I had knees again. Madison, he said. And the word felt like a physical weight pressing me into the ground. I tried to look back for Jesus, but he was gone. It was just me and this titan of light. I thought about the hospital. I thought about the monitor. I realized I'd left my phone on the trail. I wondered if anyone had found my car at the trailhead. Such stupid, small thoughts. I'm not ready for this part, I whispered. Stand up, the voice said. It wasn't a command. It was a calibration. I tried to pull my thoughts together. But I kept seeing the image of that blue thread of light. I kept thinking about the baby's heart. I'd spent 32 weeks calling him the pregnancy. I'd never given him a name. I was too afraid to commit to the design. I looked at the archangel, and I realized I was still holding my breath. The light hitting my chest wasn't just light, it was a sound. If you've ever sat in a car with a massive subwoofer and felt the bass rattle your actual rib cage, that's what this was. But it wasn't low. It was this high-frequency hum that seemed to be scanning me. It was looking for the noise in my signal. I tried to step back, but my feet were locked to the floor. The ground felt like cold, smooth slate. "Madison, look at me," the frequency said. I looked up at the archangel. He wasn't a guy with wings. He was a vertical column of white-hot interference. It was like looking at a star that had been compressed into the shape of a soldier. Every time he spoke, the air around him rippled like a heat haze on a highway. "You are carrying a lot of corrupt files," he said. I knew what he meant. I could feel them. They were like heavy black stones stitched into my skin. The rape, the abortion. The nights in Seattle when I drank until the room spun just so I wouldn't have to hear my own thoughts. He raised his hand higher. "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High," he began. The words didn't come out as speech. They came out as a physical wave. I'd heard Psalm 91 1,000 times in the Catholic church I grew up in. It always sounded like a nice poem, something people put on bookmarks. But when he said it, it felt like a power washer hitting my soul. "He will cover you with his feathers," the archangel said. The poison I'd felt in the field, the lead taste of the eclampsia, the literal toxins in my blood, I felt them being vibrated out of me. My skin felt like it was prickling. My hair stood up. It was like being in a room with a massive electrostatic generator. "You think you're a victim, Madison," he said. His voice was like a hammer on an anvil. "You think the trauma is who you are." "It's what happened," I yelled. I was crying now. I could feel the hot tracks on my cheeks. I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for any of it. I was just trying to survive the night. I was just trying to get through my life without it falling apart. The light intensified. "The trauma is just the distortion," he said. "It's not the signal. We're going to clear the channel now." And then Jesus was there again. He didn't arrive. He just seemed to be part of the light that was already there. He walked right into the path of the archangel's frequency. He looked at me, and then he did something strange. He gestured to the space next to me. "Madison," Jesus said, "I want you to meet the rest of the team." I looked to my left. There was a girl there. She was 5. She was wearing a dress with sunflowers on it, and her hair was in messy pigtails. She was crying because she'd gotten lost in a grocery store. I remembered that day. I remember the smell of the floor wax and the terror of all those giant legs moving past me. Next to her was a girl who was 12. She was wearing a baggy sweatshirt, trying to hide her body. She looked miserable. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the drywall. And then there was the 22-year-old, the version of me from the clinic. The version of me with the smeared mascara and the heavy, dead eyes. I looked at them and I felt a surge of, I don't know, it wasn't love. It was more like I wanted to delete them. I wanted to drag those layers to the trash can and empty it. "What are they doing here?" I asked Jesus. My voice was shaking. I spent 10 years trying to forget them. "You can't forget yourself into being whole, Madison," Jesus said. He walked over to the 5-year-old and put a hand on her shoulder. The girl stopped crying. She looked up at him like he was the only thing in the world that made sense. "What would you do with these girls?" Jesus asked me. "I'd kick them out," I said. It came out harsher than I meant it to. "They're too much work. They're broken. They're the reason I'm so messed up." Jesus looked at me, and for a second, he looked genuinely sad. It wasn't a pitying look. It was the look of a creator seeing a masterpiece being treated like a scrap of paper. "If you had a design file," he said, "and one of the layers had a smudge on it, would you throw the whole computer away?" I didn't answer. I knew the answer. I'd spend 4 hours cleaning up a single pixel if I had to. "You've been treating your own history like garbage," Jesus said. "But these aren't mistakes. These are the parts of you that need the most light." He looked at the 5-year-old, then the 12-year-old, then the college student. "If you could name them," he said, "not Madison, what would you name them?" I looked at the 12-year-old. I saw the way her hands were clenched into fists. I saw the 22-year-old's hollowed-out face. I'd name them love, I whispered. It was the only word that didn't feel like a lie. As soon as I said it, the archangel's frequency shifted. It went from a roar to a hum, a warm, golden hum. I watched the 5-year-old walk toward me. She didn't say anything. She just walked right into my legs and disappeared. I felt a warmth in my knees, like I just stepped into a hot bath. Then the 12-year-old, then the student. One by one, they were reintegrating. They weren't fixed. They were just accepted. I felt my chest expanding. I felt the refuge the archangel had been talking about. It wasn't a place. It was the feeling of not being at war with myself anymore. But then the vibration started to change. It got sharper, more clinical. I looked at Jesus. What's happening? Why is it getting cold? The blood is coming back, he said. His voice was getting distorted, like a bad cell phone connection. The archangel was fading into a blur of white noise. We're running out of time on this frequency, Madison, Jesus said. You have to go back. Your work isn't done. I don't want to go back to the pain, I screamed. I reached out for him, but my hands were becoming transparent. I don't want to go back to the hospital and the needles and the blood pressure and the... You're not going back alone, he said. He pointed down, not to the field, but to the baby. He's the anchor, Jesus said. He's the reason you're staying. Tell them, Madison. Tell the ones who think they've deleted their souls that I keep the backup. I always keep the backup. The light started to strobe. Pink, green. The lead taste came back to my tongue. I tried to find a word for the way the 5-year-old felt when she merged with me, a word for the way the archangel's voice felt like a shield. I reached for a descriptor, something about the resolution, something about the saturation of the grace, but the language was failing me. The words were just pixels. They were breaking apart. I wanted to say thank you, but my jaw was locking. I was back in the magenta sky. I was back in the field. The wildflowers were scratching my face. I could hear a helicopter. It sounded like the archangel's frequency, but it was ugly. It was mechanical. I tried to say his name, not Jesus, not God. I tried to say the name of the sound, but my lungs were full of water. And then everything went black. The table was back. For a split second, the wood grain was the only thing in the universe. I grabbed the edge of the oak so hard I thought I'd leave fingerprints in the finish. It was like I was trying to anchor myself to the resolution of it before the whole file crashed. Jesus was still there. He hadn't moved. He looked like he was waiting for the final render to finish. I can't go back, I said. My voice was a jagged mess. I'm 32 weeks. My blood is full of lead. My brain is swelling. If I go back, I'm just going back to a broken machine. I'll just fail him again. I looked down at my hands. They were starting to flicker. The transparency was moving up my arms. You're looking at the hardware, Madison, Jesus said. He tapped the table. The sound was solid, real. But we're talking about the software, he continued. The soul you thought was gone, it wasn't a deleted file. It was a redirected one. I felt a sharp, cold pinch in my chest. I thought about the clinic 10 years ago. I thought about the way I'd looked at the ultrasound and seen nothing but a smudge of gray. You mean it's really him? I asked. The baby, right now, the one on the Paradise Trail? It's the same one? Jesus nodded. He didn't smile this time. He looked at me with a gravity that made my knees feel like they were made of water. We don't lose anything here, he said. The timing wasn't right then. You were a child yourself. You were in a room full of shadows. So I held him. I kept the backup. I put my hands over my face. I didn't feel peace. I felt a weight so heavy I thought I'd be crushed into the floor. The guilt I'd carried for 10 years, the idea that I'd snuffed out a life, it was being replaced by this massive, terrifying responsibility. He chose to come back now, Jesus said, because you finally started to look up. I was an atheist, I yelled. I pulled my hands away from my face. I spent 10 years telling people you weren't real. I mocked them. I hated you for letting that guy touch me when I was 22. Jesus stood up. The light in the room shifted, turning from that bright, clean white to a deep, resonant gold. I know, he said. I was there for the mockery. I was there for the wine. I was there for the nights you cried until you threw up. I didn't leave the room just because you turned off the lights, Madison. I felt a sob rip through me. Not a crying sob. a physical convulsion. "I'm losing the connection," I whispered. The table was blurring. The wood grain was turning into flat, gray pixels. The man in the gray shirt was becoming a silhouette of light. "Go back," he said. His voice was a whisper now, echoing like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "The file is open. Finish the design." And then the drop happened. It didn't feel like flying. It felt like being pushed out of a plane without a parachute and hitting a wall of ice. Sensation rushed back in a horrific, violent flood. The smell of bleach, the sound of a ventilator, that rhythmic, mechanical whoosh-click, whoosh-click, the feeling of a tube in my throat. I tried to cough, but I couldn't move my diaphragm. My hands were strapped down. I opened my eyes and the world was low-res, blurry, fluorescent lights. Someone was shouting, "She's post-ictal! Watch the pressure!" I tried to scream, "Where is he?" But all that came out was a wet, metallic gurgle. I felt the hot sting of an IV being flushed in my arm. Then everything went black again. It stayed black for a long time. Or maybe it was 5 minutes. Time didn't have a scale anymore. When I finally woke up for real, I was in a room at Harborview. The light was gray, that classic Seattle overcast. It was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. I knew that because there was a digital clock on the wall. My husband, Mark, was sitting in the chair by the window. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His shirt was wrinkled. He was holding a paper cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping him on the planet. "Mark?" I croaked. My throat felt like I'd swallowed a handful of thumbtacks. He jumped. The coffee spilled a little. He was at the bed in 2 seconds, grabbing my hand. His skin felt like sandpaper. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever felt. "Madison? Oh my God, Madison." "The baby," I said. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it was made of lead. Is he gone?" Mark shook his head. He was crying. Big, ugly, messy tears. "He's in the NICU. He's small, Madison, 32 weeks. But he's breathing. They had to do an emergency C-section as soon as the medevac landed. Your pressure was 210 over 140. They didn't think." He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. "Is his heart okay?" I asked. Mark looked confused. "Yeah, it's strong. He's a fighter. The doctors are calling it a miracle. They don't know how he didn't have brain damage from the seizure." I closed my eyes. I could still see the blue thread of light. I could still see the archangel's hand. I spent the next 6 days in a fog of blood pressure meds and magnesium. The mag is the worst. It makes your brain feel like it's being slow cooked. It's hard to hold on to a thought. I kept trying to find the words to tell Mark about the table, about the light box, about the soul that had been held in the queue. But every time I tried to speak, the words felt too small. How do you explain resolution to someone who's just glad you're not dead? How do you tell your husband that the son he's holding is the same soul you deleted 10 years ago? I didn't tell him. I haven't told anyone until now. They let me see the baby on the 3rd day. They wheeled my bed into the NICU. It's a quiet place, full of the sound of humming machines and the smell of antiseptic. He was so tiny. He was covered in wires. He had a little CPAP mask on his face. But his hands, they were moving. His fingers were long and thin. I reached through the porthole of the isolette and touched his wrist. The blue vein was there. Sharp, high contrast. I didn't feel peace. I felt a terrifying, sharp clarity. I realized that my life wasn't a finished design. It was a work in progress. I still have the rape in my files. I still have the gray years. I still have the nights where I don't believe any of this happened. But then I look at him. I'm home now. It's been 6 days since the field. My blood pressure is down, but I still have to take the pills. I have to check my levels every 4 hours. I sit in the nursery I spent 3 months avoiding. I look at the crib. It's white, simple. I have a stack of Pantone swatches on my desk. I was supposed to pick a color for the logo of a new tech startup. I've been staring at them for an hour. "Cool gray 7, I mutter. I pick up the swatch. I look at it. Then I look at the window. The Seattle rain is hitting the glass. It's gray. Everything is gray. But I know what's under the layer. I pick up my phone. I have 42 unread messages. Clients, friends, my mom. I don't reply. I just open my design software. I create a new file. 8.5 by 11. White background. I create one layer. I fill it with a deep, high saturation blue. Then I set the opacity to 10%. I can barely see it, but I know it's there. I look at the monitor until my eyes hurt. Then I hear him. In the other room, the baby is waking up. It's a thin, sharp cry. It sounds like a frequency. I stand up. My knees still feel a little heavy. I walk toward the door. I haven't picked a name yet. I'm waiting for the right font, but I know who he is. I walk into the hall. The light is dim. I can hear the rain. I can hear my own breath. I reach for the door handle. It's cold, real. I just need to finish this one thing. The neurologists at Harborview Medical Center eventually signed off on Madison's release. They called her recovery from the eclampsia remarkable, though they noted she might have some lingering sensory sensitivities. That's the official version. The medical file is closed. It says she collapsed, she seized, and she was saved by modern medicine. But there's one detail that didn't make it into the discharge papers. It was a small thing. A technician found it while they were prepping her for the MRI, right after she arrived by helicopter from the Paradise Trail. Tucked deep into the folds of her maternity leggings, the ones they had to cut off her in the ER, were 3 dried seed heads from a subalpine wildflower. They weren't crushed. They were perfectly intact. The thing is, that specific species doesn't bloom on Mount Rainier until late July, and Madison collapsed in the first week of May.